Welcome. NOAA has just released its August of 2022 Global Climate Report, and this video is a summary of that report. The main feature is there have been a lot of high temperatures around the globe, and we're now into September and those high temperatures have continued. So it brings into play the question, will this summer ever end? This is a quick summary of what we're going to talk about today. August was the sixth warmest August on record. That's of 143 years worth of samples. La Nina is still present, and there's a 54% probability of it remaining until March of 2023. Now that's much longer than I reported just last month, so this thing is really stretching out. The Antarctic had its lowest August sea ice extent on record. Atmospheric CO2 reached a new record for August of 419 parts per million, and extreme weather stories dominated the headlines worldwide. Here's a map of how some of these climate features are distributed around the globe. North America had its hottest August on record, as did Europe. Asia the fourth hottest. Pakistan was dominated by tremendous flooding. Africa was above average in temperature, and the Southwest Pacific was at ninth hottest on record. South America was dominated by 33,000 fires, and La Nina is still persisting in the Eastern Pacific. This is what they call a percentiles map. Here, dark blue indicates record cold and dark red indicates record heat. And you can see there are no record cold pixels in this map. But there are a lot of record high temperature pixels, or much above average or warmer than average. The slash of blue just off the west coast of South America is evidence for La Nina. The global average temperature is 0.9 degrees centigrade above the 20th century average. Land 1.23 degrees centigrade. Oceans 0.78 degrees centigrade. The Northern Hemisphere was 1.2 degrees centigrade above the 20th century average, and that was the highest ever recorded. The Southern Hemisphere was the 11th at 0.59 degrees centigrade. You often hear that it's difficult to disentangle the short-term variability of the climate caused by things like El Nino and La Nina from the long-term slower changes from global warming. Here's an effort to do that by choosing a particular value of the Southern Oscillation Index, which is a measure of the intensity of El Nino and La Nina. Positive values of SOI indicate a La Nina. So I've taken values between 1.5 and 1.9, which is either side of the current value of SOI of 1.7. So this is the plot of the global temperature for those dates where the SOI fell in that range. And you can see it shows a fairly straightforward increase in global temperatures. In fact, it looks as though it's accelerating over time. And this is an average rate of rise of something like about 1.8 degrees centigrade per decade. Here I have plotted the relative ranking of each month over the last several years with global temperatures. And you can see August of 2022 was ranked 6th. At the current rate, it looks as though 2022 will be the sixth warmest year on record, displacing 2021. But we've still got another 4 months to go, so that's by no means certain. Now let's take a look at the upper atmosphere. This is data from the University of Alabama, Huntsville, but processed by Roy Spencer, a global warming skeptic, I would add. And you can see the change in the data. This is up in the troposphere, about average between 0 and 13 kilometers. The August temperatures are similar to those of July, but it's still relatively high in the overall scheme of things. The long-term trend here is 0.14 degrees centigrade per decade. Now that's lower than the surface temperatures which we've been dealing with up until now. But you'd expect that. First of all, higher in the atmosphere is a lot cooler, and they have less interaction with the ocean and the land, which is what determines the surface temperature. The Arctic sea ice extent, it was the 13th lowest on record for August of 2022. You see it's actually increased slightly over the last few years for that month, but nonetheless it's still below average and the trend is still overall downwards. Now let's take a look at the Antarctic sea ice. It was a record low for August of 2022. That's 7% lower than the equivalent month in 2021. That's quite a big change. So what is the status of La Nina at the moment? You can see here a plot month by month for the relative probability of La Nina, which is in blue, ENSO neutral conditions, which is in grey, or an El Nino, which is in red. and you can see until the spring of next year La Nina is expected to continue. Then ENSO neutral conditions will take over early next year, and the possibility of an El Nino later in the year seems to be rising. Now let's take a look at the all-important carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere. It set a new record for August of 2022. You can see it's significantly increased over the same time last year. Total carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere is 418.9 parts per million, and that's an increase of 1.96 parts per million over this time last year. Just for grins, I've thrown in the status of the solar cycle because there are still a few people that believe that the sun has something to do with global warming. By the way, it doesn't. Solar cycle 25 is continuing to grow, and we're on the rise phase of that cycle. It's well ahead of predictions by something like about 50%, and that indicates that there's going to be a larger cycle than the previous cycle. And there is no sign of a grand solar minimum, otherwise we wouldn't be getting all these sunspots. Now let's take a look at some of the newspaper headlines from the month of August. At the beginning of the month, England declared that it had had the driest month in July in 185 years, i.e. since records began. On the 4th of July, it was so hot in Iraq that most of the workers were given the day off because the temperature was 40 degrees centigrade. On the 5th of August, it was announced that thousands of trees are dying because of heat and lack of water. That's in the UK. On the 9th of August, it was mentioned that alpine glaciers are melting at a record pace. Again, on the same day, water shortages in Panama were creating problems for the Panama Canal. They don't have enough water to float the ships through the canal. On the 10th of August, it was announced that there was no aquatic life left in the upper reaches of the Thames River, as the source of the Thames had dried up. And it got worse in the UK on the 12th of August, when an amber heatwave alert was sent out to the community. The Rhine River is running dry, barge traffic was hindered. On the 14th of August, it was announced that there had been 500 more wildfires so far that year than in the whole of 2021 in the UK. In Panama, were forced from their homes in the belief that they were going to be flooded in the relatively near future. The 23rd of August, there were articles indicating that the European drought was the worst in at least 500 years. And even in Texas, there was a drought problem that started to reveal dinosaur footprints at the bottom of a lake. Russia started burning off excess natural gas on the 26th of August. Pakistan was hit by massive flooding that same day. A third of the country is underwater. Thousands died or are missing. On the 27th of August, the talks to set up an ocean protection treaty broke down, and so no treaty was derived. It's so hot in England at the moment that they're beginning to grow what they call exotic plants, things like watermelon, figs, avocados, and even pineapples. On the 30th of August, an official drought declared across the whole of England. Please note, this is only a tiny portion of the climate headlines I found in the month of August. And in September, the numbers are even bigger. So in summary then, La Nina is hanging on longer than was expected. Globally, it was the 6th hottest August on record. Atmospheric CO2 reached another new high record for August. And the sun is outpacing the models of solar cycle 25. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.